Picture this. A fierce laser battle erupts aboard Unity Station, plasma bolts crackling through the air. At the heart of it all stands Damon Gray, throwing himself into the line of fire to shield Princess Artemisia, risking his life so she can expose a dangerous conspiracy. Curious how they got there and whether they survived this explosive showdown? You've come to the right place. Stay tuned to hear the entire story of heroism, betrayal, and unexpected romance that unfolds across star systems. And if you love thrilling adventures, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more tales of daring rescues and galactic intrigue. Buckle up, because this is only the beginning of a journey you won't want to miss. Damon Gray's boots clanged loudly against the reinforced metal floor of Outpost Crescent 9, the echo reverberating down a corridor that reeked of stale air recyclers and the acrid smell of artificially distilled liquor. He had just delivered 3 large crates of rare Terran minerals, a painstaking endeavor that demanded not only a significant portion of his fuel reserves, but also favors from people he would prefer to keep at a distance. As an independent captain for hire, Damon had expected at least straightforward, if not timely, payment for his latest job. Instead, he found himself glaring across a narrow walkway at Tarek, a greenish-hued Sarath trader whose scaled skin looked almost iridescent under the flickering overhead lights. Tarek was fidgeting near the loading dock, gills flaring in the telltale sign of Sarath nervousness. "I don't have your credits," Tarek said, glancing side to side to see if anyone was within earshot. The sounds of raucous laughter and the low hum of power generators underscored the tension in the corridor. His forked tongue flicked out with each breath, tasting the air for Damon's reaction. "Markets collapsed since you left, Gray. Those minerals you hauled halfway across the galaxy aren't worth even half of what they used to be." Damon set his jaw, refusing to step back. He was tall, taller than most people in this part of the galaxy, and he used his lean frame and steely gaze to project an air of controlled menace. "That's not my problem," he said. "We had a deal. 3 crates of rare Terran minerals for 20,000 standard credits. No haggling, no excuses." Tarek's slit-pupiled eyes blinked rapidly, and he raised a scaly hand in supplication. "Look, I can't conjure up credits out of thin air, but I do have something else." His words trailed off in a conspiratorial whisper, and he gestured toward a secondary hatch that led into a more secluded wing of the outpost. Damon hated the slippery sense of dread crawling up his spine. Deals made in back rooms rarely ended well, but with his fuel cells nearly depleted, he didn't see a better option. If he left empty-handed, he couldn't even afford to get to the next station, let alone pay for further supplies. "One word of warning," Damon said, voice low and even. "If you try any funny business, I won't hesitate to make you regret it." With that, he cocked a thumb toward the pistol holstered at his right hip. The grip was worn smooth from years of use, a testament to Damon's time in the Terran Defense Forces and all the combat missions he'd flown before turning mercenary. Tarek only offered a taut-lipped smile, if it could be called that. Sarath had an odd way of showing amusement, their mouths stretching horizontally rather than curving upward. "No contraband," Tarek promised. "Just something valuable, far more valuable than credits." Damon's instincts screamed at him to turn on his heel and walk away. Yet that single phrase, "far more valuable than credits," lured him in. Rubbing a hand over the stubble on his chin, he signaled Tarek to lead the way. Whatever game the Sarath was playing, Damon intended to find out, even if it meant stepping into murky territory that he had sworn to avoid. Tarek slid open the door to a sparse chamber, lit only by a single overhead lamp that buzzed faintly. The space held little more than a rickety chair and a low table stacked with digital ledgers. Behind the chair stood a figure cloaked in dark material, the hood drawn so that only the narrow hint of a face was visible in the flickering light. Damon felt his pulse quicken as he realized the figure's limbs were bound by shackles that attached to the chair's rear legs. This was not some informal meeting space. It was a holding cell. "So that's your offer?" Damon asked, voice dropping an octave. "A person?" "Not just a person," Tarek replied, stepping forward to place a scaled hand on the hooded figure's shoulder. "A rare commodity, someone who's worth a fortune, if you know where to look." With one quick motion, Tarek yanked back the hood, revealing a woman with skin tinted a mesmerizing shade of amethyst and eyes of liquid silver. Her hair, cascading over her shoulders, reflected a deep indigo under the harsh light. Her features were sharp and noble, from the high cheekbones to the delicate curve of her lips. Everything about her screamed an unearthly elegance. Damon froze, the breath catching in his throat. He recognized that hue of skin, though he had never seen it in person. "A Valaran?" he asked, incredulous. The Valaran were known for their closely guarded enclaves and rumored vast fortunes. He had heard they were an ancient, aristocratic lineage, though seldom seen in the Outer Rim. "Are you kidding me, Tarek? Slavery is illegal in half the known galaxy. I don't trade in flesh." Tarek's gills quivered. "Officially, yes, it's illegal. Unofficially, there are plenty of places." "No," Damon spat, cutting him off. His fist clenched at his sides as he tried to quell the revulsion pulsing through his veins. He had done a lot of morally gray jobs in his life, but selling living beings was a line he had never crossed and never would. The woman lifted her gaze to meet Damon's, her eyes steady and inscrutable. There was no supplication in her expression, no silent plea for rescue. Instead, she regarded him with an unwavering calm that Damon found unsettling. She radiated the kind of confidence one wouldn't expect from someone bound to a chair. He wondered what manner of secrets lay behind that fortitude. "You either accept her as payment," Tarek hissed, "or you leave with nothing. And let's not forget, I have associates monitoring your ship. If you try forcing me, you'll never make it off this station alive, especially with your Star Chaser's fuel gauge near empty. Hard to outrun a well-armed blockade when you're running on fumes, no?" Damon's heart hammered in his chest. In the cramped space, he could feel the dryness in his throat, the tension behind his eyes. He had only two bad options: walk away empty-handed, effectively surrendering his livelihood, or accept Tarek's grotesque trade. Doing so would set him on a path he had always vowed to avoid. Yet leaving the woman here felt equally wrong, a betrayal of every principle he still clung to. "Fine," Damon ground out, his voice raw. He couldn't leave her in this place, not like this. "But don't think for a second this settles our account, Tarek. We're far from even." With a predatory smile, Tarek handed over a slim control chip. "Standard neural restraint. She can't disobey a direct command if you activate it." Damon accepted the chip with a grimace, as though it were a snake threatening to bite. His gaze flicked to the woman who was quietly watching the exchange. She rose to her feet the moment Tarek released her shackles, revealing a graceful posture that contrasted sharply with the room's squalor. "Come on," Damon said, gesturing for her to follow. He kept his voice as neutral as possible, though an uneasy feeling churned in his gut. She moved toward the door with fluid steps, her head held high, a regal bearing that tugged at Damon's curiosity. Why would someone so composed and poised end up as a slave, especially someone rumored to be from a people as well off as the Valarin? Just as she passed him, the woman paused, her shoulder nearly brushing his chest. In a low, resonant voice, she said, "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." The words, though softly spoken, carried more weight than any threat Tarek had uttered. Damon tried not to stare, but those silver eyes pinned him in place. "Add it to the list," he muttered, eventually finding his voice. Without a backward glance, he led her from the cramped room down a winding corridor that opened onto the outpost's main concourse. Littered with merchants hawking half-legal wares, freelance bounty hunters seeking contracts, and unscrupulous navigators offering illicit star charts, the hall was a riot of noise and questionable deals. Damon guided the woman through the throng, ignoring the curious glances and whispered remarks. A tall human man accompanied by a striking Valaran woman tended to draw attention, and not all of it was benign. A few sneers and jests were tossed their way, but Damon's stern expression and hand near his holstered pistol were enough to ward off direct confrontation. The woman, for her part, remained silent, though her discerning gaze took in every detail around them. Once they reached Docking Bay Epsilon, Damon keyed in his security code. The heavy blast door grated open, revealing his vessel, the Star Chaser, resting in the cramped hangar. He had owned the Star Chaser for years, ever since leaving the Terran Defense Forces. Once a standard interstellar cargo provider, it had been retrofitted with military-grade shields, an upgraded engine armorium and concealed weaponry. Damon told himself that a captain making deliveries across lawless sectors had the right to protect himself, though the reality was that old habits from his service days died hard. As the entry ramp lowered, he glanced over at the woman. "My ship isn't a palace," he said curtly, "but it'll keep you alive, which is more than that outpost could guarantee. Go inside." She tilted her head in calm assessment of the sleek lines of the ship. "Mark IV stabilizers?" she asked, surprising Damon with her technical knowledge. "Those must be good for reducing turbulence. Although it sounds like your port thruster is misaligned, about 2 or 3 degrees off, if I'm hearing correctly." Damon gave her a sharp look. "Are you a mechanic too?" he asked, stepping up the ramp behind her. Her only response was a slight, enigmatic smile. Inside, the Star Chaser's quarters were compact but meticulously maintained. Damon's time in the military had instilled in him a sense of organization, from color-coded supply crates to regular maintenance checks. He guided the woman past the small galley and a cramped wreck area, leading her to the ship's main control deck. He would have preferred to lock her away in the spare quarters until he decided what to do next, but curiosity nibbled at him, and he found himself wanting answers, answers that might only come from keeping her close. With a low hiss, the cockpit door slid open, revealing an array of consoles, readouts, and an expansive front viewport that looked out onto the twinkling abyss of space. Damon slid into the pilot's chair, initiating pre-flight checks with well-practiced efficiency. He half expected the woman to stand at the doorway, waiting for instructions. Instead, she settled into the co-pilot's seat, her posture self-assured as though she belonged there. Her violet skin seemed almost luminous under the cockpit's overhead glow. "Aren't you going to strap in?" she asked softly, catching Damon off guard. Her melodic voice filled the small cockpit. "We're about to take off, are we not?" He raised an eyebrow. "You seem to think you have a say in how things work on my ship." She shrugged, an elegant movement of her shoulders that conveyed an air of calm. "I simply prefer not to die if something malfunctions during launch. I also like to know who is flying me around and why." Her gaze flicked to the control chip Damon still held. "I notice you haven't used that." "Why?" The question put Damon on edge. "Because I don't need to," he lied. The truth was the idea of forcing someone's obedience repulsed him. Tarek's threat aside, Damon had never seen a reason to treat a sentient being like property. He hoped the conversation would end there, but the woman seemed far from finished. "My name is Artemisia," she said, turning her gaze forward as the docking clamps released. "Princess Artemisia of House Lysari, part of the Volaran monarchy, if you need the full title." "Princess," Damon echoed, the word tasting strange on his lips. "Sure you are." Her lips curved in a faint smile, though her eyes remained somber. "It's the truth, Captain Gray. My family is old and wealthy, and I was on my way to an official ceremony when I was snatched by raiders. They sold me down the line until Tarek picked me up, hoping to sell me for a massive profit." She let the statement hang in the air. Damon flipped several switches, feeling the thrusters engage and the outpost's artificial gravity release. "And if I believe this fairy tale, what do you expect me to do about it?" "Take me back to Volaran space so I can pay you what Tarek owes. And then some," Artemisia answered, turning to study him. "If you think I'm lying, you can drop me at the nearest free port. But something tells me you'd prefer the bigger payday." Tarek's credit debt was nothing compared to what a wealthy princess could offer. Yet Damon resisted the lure. "I need to see if you're actually who you say you are," he replied. "If you're telling the truth, we'll figure out next steps. But if this is some elaborate con," Artemisia completed the thought, "then you'll cut your losses?" Damon gave a non-committal shrug. "I guess we'll see." The Star Chaser eased out of the outpost's hangar, threading through the star-speckled darkness. Damon was scanning navigation routes on the console when a sudden alert flashed red across the display. "Inbound ships," he muttered. 3 vessels had peeled away from Crescent 09's orbit, weapons hot and targeting scanners locked on them. "Expecting company?" he asked, glancing sidelong at Artemisia. She bit her lower lip, betraying a glimmer of anxiety. "If they're the ones who kidnapped me originally, they won't give up easily. They're mercenaries of the Black Sun Syndicate, notorious for doing dirty work for wealthy clients." "That's just great," Damon grumbled. He revved the engines, pushing the Star Chaser to accelerate sharply. The cockpit's readouts indicated an incoming missile lock. Through the forward viewport, Damon could see the faint flicker of laser fire. Artemisia's hands flew across the co-pilot console, activating the shields and running a diagnostic on the ship's meager weapons array. Your starboard cannons are in decent shape, but the targeting calibration is off. You might want to pivot left if they start a strafing run. Since when does a princess know how to manage starship combat? Damon asked, a tightness edging into his voice as he banked the ship to avoid a volley of laser fire. The Star Chaser trembled, metal struts groaning, but the shields held at 70%. She exhaled slowly. Because I was trained. My house sits on crucial trade routes. So we either learned how to defend ourselves, or we ended up at the mercy of pirates and criminal elements. I decided to learn. That's convenient, Damon said, swinging the nose of the ship toward the nearest pursuer. A reticule blinked on his screen, locking onto the enemy's thrusters. He fired a short burst, and the mercenary pilot veered away to avoid direct hits. Guess I won't complain if it helps us survive. Another alarm shrieked. Artemisia's face tightened. They've launched a torpedo. If it hits us, the radiation alone could fry half our systems. Damon cursed under his breath. Strap in! He pitched the Star Chaser into a tight spiral, attempting to scramble the torpedo's tracking. Artemisia tapped the console repeatedly, launching a countermeasure that exploded in a dazzling burst of electromagnetic interference. An instant later, the torpedo veered off course, spiraling away into the emptiness of space. It detonated harmlessly, a silent explosion of light. That was too close, Damon muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. He hammered the throttle forward, aiming for a narrow gap between two drifting cargo barges. The mercenary ships followed doggedly, their beams lancing bright columns in the star-dappled darkness. Despite the tension, Damon felt a jolt of admiration at how seamlessly Artemisia was working the co-pilot station. She was calm under pressure, calling out speed vectors and shield statuses, matching her input to his maneuvers without hesitation. It was almost as if they had flown together for years. As the Star Chaser darted beneath one of the barges, he caught a glimpse of Artemisia's face, taut with concentration, yet oddly confident. If she was rattled, she concealed it well. The first mercenary vessel swooped overhead, peppering the Star Chaser with laser fire. Damon flinched as several blasts hammered their aft shields, dropping them to just over 50% capacity. He accelerated abruptly, weaving through the labyrinth of space debris that surrounded Crescent Nine's orbit. Massive, decommissioned hull sections and transport containers drifted aimlessly, forming a precarious field that could offer cover or instant death if he miscalculated. Keep them busy, Artemisia said. If I rear out power from the life support backup, I might be able to reinforce the shields long enough for us to make a jump to safer territory. Without waiting for Damon's response, she began tapping furiously on the console, diverting power flows and optimizing the shield emitters. The hum beneath their feet shifted, a deepened vibration that indicated the shift in the ship's energy distribution. Damon focused on piloting, trusting her to manage the systems. The Star Chaser danced between floating shards of metal, narrowly missing jagged edges that could tear through the hull like tinfoil. The navigation computer bleeped incessantly, alarmed by the close proximity of multiple obstacles. We can't keep this up, Damon said through gritted teeth. We'll run out of stable routes. Just another minute, she insisted, her eyes darting between shield readouts and power levels. A second blast rocked the ship, nearly throwing them into a spinning chunk of plating. Damon jerked the controls, forcing the Star Chaser to lurch sideways. The engine whined in protest, but they avoided collision by a hair's breadth. Finally, Artemisia punched a final command into the console. A surge in the shield output readouts showed they had gained a modest bump in protective power. Got it, she exclaimed. Coordinates for a short-range jump are locked in. We need to clear the station's gravitational interference first. Hang on, Damon called, pivoting the ship to face open space. The pursuers, still dogged, pressed their advantage. One mercenary pilot, perhaps emboldened by the Star Chaser's precarious flight path, charged straight at them. Big mistake. Damon jammed the forward cannon triggers, unleashing a barrage of laser fire that pounded into the mercenaries' forward shields. The enemy craft broke off at the last second, pitching violently to avoid total annihilation. Go now, Artemisia urged. The nav computer trilled, indicating they had just enough distance to attempt an FTL micro jump. Damon slammed the hyperspace lever. A swirling tunnel of blue and white enveloped them, the starfield smearing into elongated lines. A moment later, the ship lurched. The inertial dampeners whined as they accelerated to faster-than-light speeds for a brief hop out of Crescent Nine's immediate zone. When the swirling lights dissipated and the stars reoriented to pinpricks in the void, Damon exhaled. That should buy us some time, but the Black Sun Syndicate won't just give up. Artemisia nodded, unclenching her fingers from the console. They both took a moment to collect themselves. Damon couldn't ignore the adrenaline thrumming in his veins, a curious mixture of dread and exhilaration. "You handle yourself well," he said at last, swiveling in the pilot's chair to face her. "Not just any passenger could reroute my ship's power systems mid-battle." She arched a delicate brow. "I told you, my family prepared me for more than fancy banquets. You might be surprised at what else I can do." Damon eyed her thoughtfully. "Or you might be lying about who you are," he said softly. "But for now, you've earned the benefit of the doubt." They ran a series of diagnostics, ensuring no critical damage would hamper further travel. In the subdued lights of the cockpit, the tension slowly ebbed. The jump had brought them closer to a vast nebula known as the Celestine Shroud. Its swirling plumes of purple, pink, and gold stretched for parsecs, a cosmic miasma often rumored to scramble weaker nav systems. But it also provided excellent cover from prying eyes. Artemisia studied the readouts. "If we fly into the shroud, the radiation will make it harder for them to track our signature. Of course, that assumes we can pilot through the storms without frying ourselves." Damon considered their position. "I've flown through a few nebulas before. This one can be nasty, but I'd rather risk celestial turbulence than face the Syndicate head-on. They'll be regrouping and tracking us. Our best chance is to hide, refuel somewhere on the other side, then figure out what the hell to do next." Artemisia turned in her seat. "Do you trust me enough to let me help?" "Trust isn't the right word," Damon replied. He looked down at the control chip Tarek had given him, still resting near the throttle. "Let's say we're forced to cooperate, that's all." A wry smile bugged at the corner of her mouth. "It's a start, I suppose." She reached over to gently lift the chip in her slender fingers. "You really hate the idea of using this, don't you?" "I hate the idea of enslaving anyone," Damon answered, voice tight. "You want to call yourself a princess, fine. But that doesn't change the fact that no one deserves to be treated like a commodity." Her expression softened. "That's an admirable viewpoint, Captain Gray." He gave a half shrug, uncomfortable with the praise. "Look, let's just get through the shroud. After that, we can discuss how a princess became a captive of the Black Sun Syndicate and ended up as Tarek's last-ditch payoff." Artemisia ran her fingers across the console, initiating the next flight path. "I was traveling incognito to a distant colony on official business. My security detail was small. We were trying to avoid attention. It turns out we avoided it too well. Mercenaries ambushed us. The rest of my retinue is likely either dead or sold off somewhere." She paused, her voice quavering briefly before she steadied it. "My kidnappers intended to ransom me, but apparently the buyer changed their mind or never showed up, leaving Tarek to gamble on another approach." Damon nodded, turning his attention to calibrating the Star Chaser's sensors for the nebula approach. "And now you've got me caught up in your trouble. Typical." "Don't act like you're above it all," she shot back. "You're a mercenary, yes, but you also took a stand today. Twice. Once against Tarek and again against those syndicate ships. You risked your life to help me escape, so maybe you're not as cynical as you'd like to pretend." Damon felt heat climb up his neck. "I'm just doing what I have to do, Lady Artemisia. Don't read more into it than that." She leaned back, crossing her arms. "Call me by my name, at least. Skip the lady. It feels ridiculous, given the circumstances." He nodded curtly, refusing to admit even to himself that her straightforward confidence made him admire her more. "Fine, then hang on, Artemisia. We're heading into the Celestine Shroud." For the first few minutes after that short-range jump, both Damon Gray and Artemisia simply stared at the holographic readouts, listening to the soft ping and whir of the Star Chaser's systems adjusting to the new region of space. Swirls of deep violet and shimmering gold filled the main viewport, evidence that they had reached the outer edges of the Celestine Shroud, a nebula famous for its ion storms and fierce radiation spikes. Damon's brow furrowed, recalling all the grim stories he had heard about ships attempting to navigate the shroud. Even a handful of his old Terran defense comrades had labeled it a starship graveyard. Yet now, here they were, about to risk it because Black Sun mercenaries waited behind them, an equally lethal threat. Artemisia tapped a few keys on the co-pilot's console, bringing up a partial map of the shroud's known pockets of instability. The cartography was incomplete, peppered with disclaimers and red zones where sensor readings were virtually impossible to interpret. "This is our best shot," she said, her voice cool but laced with tension. "We'll use the radiation as a shield. The Syndicate can't track us as easily in here." "And the flip side is that we have to keep the Star Chaser in one piece," Damon replied, rubbing the stubble on his chin. The swirling colors of the shroud seemed to reach for them like phosphorescent tendrils, as if daring them to come closer. "My old squadron had a saying, better to face an enemy you can see than a phenomenon that doesn't care whether you live or die." Artemisia's lips twitched with what might have been a weary smile. "Sounds like your squadron didn't go for uplifting mottos." "Not so much," Damon said, scanning the data again. The ship vibrated as he angled the thrusters, edging them toward a corridor of relatively lower radiation. "But we'll manage. You said earlier you learned enough about starship combat to get by. What about piloting through something like this? Have any experience?" She answered by inputting a series of rapid-fire calculations into the nav computer. "Some. The Valaran Royal Fleet sometimes trains near a smaller nebula to teach advanced flight maneuvers. But the Celestine Shroud is bigger and more unstable." She glanced at him, and he could see a flicker of uncertainty in her silver eyes. "I won't pretend I have every angle covered, but I do know how to compensate for certain ionic surges." Damon gave a curt nod. "Then you handle surge compensations, and I'll keep us on course. If we do this right, we'll be able to slip behind the radiation pockets, circle around, and reach a hidden outpost on the other side. I'm pretty sure there's a refueling station, though it's barely more than a scummy pit stop known as Baron's Rest. I've heard rumors they don't ask many questions." "Sounds charming." Artemisia exhaled, then laced her fingers together in her lap. "But it might be the perfect place to gather intel about the Syndicate's next moves and figure out if we can confirm my identity before we run into more complications." Damon eased the ship forward, entering the nebula's outermost layers. The sensor readouts began to fluctuate wildly, and arcs of static electricity danced along the hull. An uneasy calm settled between them, punctuated by the hum of the engines and the distant thunderclap of cosmic storms. They were in it now, and Damon couldn't help the tightness in his chest. Staring at the flickering swirl of astral matter, he wondered if, by saving Artemisia, he had only doomed them both. Yet the alternative, leaving her to Tarek or the mercenaries, felt far worse. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, guiding the Star Chaser deeper into the hypnotic chaos of the Celestine Shroud. Byron's Rest was little more than a ramshackle cluster of modular compartments lashed together like haphazard driftwood. Floating in a relatively calm pocket behind the Shroud's densest radiation fields, it served as a trading post for those who preferred minimal official oversight. Half a dozen docking spines branched out from a central core that housed fuel pumps and a communal area, all of which had seen better days. From the viewport, Damon could see flickers of jury-rigged lighting illuminating the battered hull sections. Still, the station offered what they needed: fuel, a moment's respite, and the chance to gather intelligence. Artemisia's face remained impassive as they approached. "Not exactly the luxurious setting I'm used to," she said softly. "But after being chained to a chair at Crescent 9, it's practically a palace." Damon glanced at her. "From what you've told me about your background, it must be jarring. This place is, well, let's just say people come here either to disappear or to lose themselves in shady deals." He keyed in a docking request, which was promptly granted without question. No logs, no ID, just a curt acknowledgement that told them to pick a free berth. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic clatter, and Damon powered down the main engines. Artemisia unbuckled her harness, standing up with a grace that still caught him off guard. "If you're worried about me handling myself, don't. I've dealt with suspicious corners of the galaxy before." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm more worried about the local scum noticing how uncommon you look." No offense, but you do stand out. She let out a humorless chuckle. That's an understatement. I'll keep a low profile. Then she fixed Damon with a direct look. And you'll do the same, I hope? I know mercenaries sometimes have an itchy trigger finger, but we need to keep violence to a minimum unless absolutely necessary. He smirked, sliding his sidearm into a hidden holster beneath his jacket. I won't start any trouble, but if trouble finds us, I'm not shy about ending it. A faint nod, and they exited onto the station's main walkway, where the air had a stale tang and the overhead lights flickered ominously. Tech-savvy vagrants, suspicious traders, and a few glassy-eyed drifters milled about, many wearing rebreathers due to questionable air filtration in certain sections. Neon signs buzzed above open shops that peddled black market tech and cheap consumables. Staying close, Damon and Artemisia navigated the corridors, avoiding the main bazaar where throngs of people exchanged everything from weapons to forged identity chips. Their target was a more discreet sector, a place rumored to be run by an information broker with ties to multiple star systems. If anyone knew about the Black Sun Syndicate's movements, or could confirm the existence of a missing Valaran princess, it would be that broker. After several twists and turns, they arrived at a corroded hatchway with an old keypad. Damon hesitated, punching in a code he remembered from his own shady dealings. The door slid open with a groan, revealing a dimly lit chamber stocked with rows of data cores and holographic terminals. A single figure, face obscured by a half mask and a tangle of mechanical implants, rose from a metal stool. "Damon Gray," the figure said, voice modulated through a crackling speaker. "Haven't seen you in a while. Where you been, soldier boy?" Damon tensed, not liking the moniker soldier boy. It was a reminder of a time he'd rather keep buried. "Arden," he greeted curtly, stepping fully into the chamber. Artemisia followed a pace behind, silent but observant. The half-masked broker, Arden, had once provided Damon with intel on pirate movements near Terran space, back when Damon was first establishing his freelance career. They had parted on uneasy terms, though it hadn't quite escalated to outright betrayal. Yet, Arden's gaze flicked to Artemisia, the mechanical side of their face clicking and whirring as they sized her up. "You keep interesting company these days." Their remaining human eye gleamed with curiosity. "Volaran, by the look of her. Rare to see them out here, especially in a place like this." Artemisia inclined her head politely. "I'm here by circumstance, not choice." Damon cleared his throat. "We need two things, Arden. First, confirmation of a Valaran identity. Second, intel on the Black Sun Syndicate's recent contract involving abducting someone important. You know anything about that?" A raspy chuckle emitted from Arden's vocal modulator. "Right to the point, as always. Let me guess, you got tangled up in something bigger than you expected, and now you need my help?" Damon felt his jaw clench. "We can pay," he replied, though he could sense Artemisia stiffening beside him. She had mentioned more than once that her family's resources were vast, yet Damon still didn't know how to access those resources without drawing lethal attention. Arden walked over to a battered console and tapped a few buttons. The overhead lights dimmed further, replaced by the soft glow of multiple holoscreens. "Black Sun has been ramping up operations," they said, voice crackling. "Word on the wire is they're working under contract for a big mover in the Valaran domain. Some cousin or nephew of the ruling house wants the rightful heir removed from the picture, presumably to stake a claim. Sound familiar?" Artemisia's composure faltered for just a moment. Damon glanced at her, and her eyes gleamed with a mix of anger and hurt. "My cousin, Crown Regent Leston," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "He was never content with his position while I was still set to ascend. If he's behind hiring the syndicate, it means his ambitions are more dangerous than I thought." Arden tilted their head, mechanical components shifting. "So you're the rightful heir. That means you must be Princess Artemisia of House Lissari," she confirmed. There was no arrogance in her tone, only the pragmatic acceptance that her lineage was now on the table. She crossed her arms, the posture more defiant than regal. "I need irrefutable proof of Leston's dealings with the syndicate, plus a safe route to a place where I can broadcast those proofs to the galaxy. If not for me, then for the stability of Valaran space." Arden paused as if analyzing her words, then keyed in another sequence on the console. I might have just the thing. An encrypted data trove was uploaded to my system a few days back, something that might match what you're after. Problem is it'll cost you. My business thrives on selling secrets. Damon stepped forward. How much? Arden's laugh was a dissonant crackle. More than you've got in your pockets, soldier boy. But maybe the princess can offer something else. Influence, protection, or a favor owed if she succeeds in getting back her throne. Artemisia did not flinch. She met Arden's gaze squarely, one silver eye reflecting in the glow of the console lights. Very well. If your information helps me prevent a coup in Valaran space, I'll ensure you are richly compensated. Credits, resources, or diplomatic amnesty if needed. Her tone carried a regal certainty that seemed out of place in the dingy environment. Arden considered her offer, mechanical fingers tapping idly against the console's edge. Diplomatic amnesty, you say? I do have a few outstanding warrants in certain star systems. Their one human eye narrowed with interest. All right, princess, I'll help you for a guarantee of amnesty and perhaps a modest payment. Let me show you what I have. They typed another command, and a swirling holographic display filled the center of the room. Bits of coded text, interstellar bank transfers, and message logs spun in a slow orbit. Damon whistled under his breath when he recognized a few names in the logs. High-ranking members of the Black Sun Syndicate, as well as references to a Valaran contact codenamed L. Some lines specifically mentioned an upcoming power shift in Valaran's ruling structure. That's damning, Damon muttered. Enough to show that someone in House Lissari has contracted the Syndicate. Artemisia inhaled sharply. He's gone further than I suspected. Bribes, arms shipments, even a plan to incite small skirmishes on our border worlds. Anything to destabilize my family's hold so he can slide in as a savior. She shook her head, anger plain on her face. If this data gets into the right hands, like the Galactic Trade Council or the Valaran Defense Coalition, it could unravel his entire plan. Exactly, Arden said, flicking away extraneous lines of code to reveal a more concise summary. But to do that, you need to upload it in a place where it can't be intercepted or sanitized. The Council's main hub on Unity Station, for instance. Damon grimaced. Unity Station was a fortress of neutrality, heavily policed by multiple factions. Smugglers rarely visited it willingly, and if they did, they kept their heads down. That place is crawling with security. Cameras, bioscanners, you name it. Not to mention the Black Sun might have eyes there too. Artemisia's gaze steeled. Then we do it quietly. Slip in, access one of the official broadcast terminals, and let the data speak for itself. Once it's distributed across council networks, Leston's scheme will be public knowledge. Arden nodded. A sound plan, but you'll have a limited window. The second your presence is detected, the Syndicate's local operatives will come for you. Even if they only suspect you might be carrying the incriminating evidence, they won't hesitate to start a firefight in the middle of Unity Station. Damon flexed his hands. The notion of waltzing into that stronghold with a target on his back made his gut clench. He glanced at Artemisia, who appeared resolute. We'll need more than just a plan to get in. We'll need a blueprint of the station's security protocols, plus a reliable infiltration route. That's where I can help, Arden replied. For a price, of course, but consider it a discount, given the amnesty bonus I might receive later. They paused, then added, oh, and you'll want to be careful leaving Bayron's Rest. Word travels. The Syndicate might already suspect where you're headed. Let them try, Damon growled. If we do this right, they won't have a chance to shoot first. Over the next 2 hours, Arden transferred the crucial data packets to a portable storage unit bound with advanced encryption. Artemisia oversaw the process, verifying each line of code that tied her cousin Leston to the clandestine deals. Meanwhile, Damon stood guard near the hatch, scanning the corridor for any sign that the Syndicate or local opportunists had sniffed out their deal. A couple of passers-by glanced down the hall suspiciously, but no one lingered or tried to force entry. When Arden finally handed Artemisia the storage unit, a sleek, palm-sized device with humming energy lines, she carefully tucked it into a hidden interior pocket of her jacket. This is everything I need to expose Leston, she said. Thank you. Arden's modulator crackled. Remember, I expect that amnesty and compensation. If the deal falls through, I still have backup files that can be sold to the highest bidder. They managed a grin, if the half-metallic contortion could be called that. Damon returned a curt nod. We get it, Arden. No double-crossing, or we'll make sure you regret it. Despite the outward bravado, Damon felt a twinge of unease. In places like Bayron's Rest, loyalty was fluid, and blackmail was just another form of currency. Still, he couldn't afford paranoia to freeze him into inaction. They had a mission now: reach Unity Station, slip in Estepade, and broadcast the truth that would protect Artemisia's throne. They left the broker's den with purposeful strides, making their way back through the dingy corridors. A handful of suspicious eyes watched them pass, but no one openly challenged them. Once aboard the Star Chaser, Damon wasted no time detaching from the docking clamps. The station receded behind them, little more than a battered structure in the swirling nebula. Inside the cockpit, Artemisia sank into the co-pilot's seat, exhaling a shaky breath. We have the data. Now we just have to survive getting it to Unity Station. Damon set the coordinates on the nav computer, adjusting for the shroud's radiation. We'll jump to a safer stretch of space, then plot a route to the station. With any luck, we'll slip in without broadcasting our arrival. The engines roared to life beneath his feet, and he felt the Star Chaser surge forward. But once we're there, we won't have much wiggle room. Any sign that you're on board, and security might lock us down before we can do anything. True, she agreed, but I have some idea of how Unity Station's protocols work. Some aspects of its security are standardized across the galaxy. We might be able to slip through using false identities, though you'll need to lose those military-grade modifications if they scan for unauthorized weaponry. A humorless chuckle slipped from Damon's lips. You're asking me to downgrade my own ship's defenses. That's not happening. I'll find a more covert way to hide them. I'm not strolling into that station unarmed. Artemisia's eyes met his. I understand. Just be careful. One slip and we lose any chance of broadcasting the data before the syndicate's hit squads find us. Her words hung in the air, underscored by the hum of the FTL drives charging up. Damon saw the steely determination on her face and realized she was placing a remarkable amount of trust in him, a stranger she'd met under dire circumstances. For all their banter and half-truths, they were tied together now by a common goal. After a brief jump that took them past the worst of the Celestine Shroud, Damon dropped the Star Chaser into normal space near a quiet star system. Sparse asteroids drifted in the darkness, and the sensor readings indicated no immediate threats. He used the lull to make final modifications for their impending infiltration. Artemisia disappeared into the engine room, emerging an hour later with soot smudged on her hands and a thoughtful expression on her face. I managed to reroute some power couplings so our shields won't trigger standard station scans as heavily, she reported, wiping her palms on a rag. That should reduce suspicion. But once inside, we still have to pass multiple checkpoints. Unity Station is known for its layered defenses. He nodded, sliding a panel open on the cockpit's sidewall. I've got a few concealed compartments where we can stash contraband. My usual plan is to bribe the lower-level inspectors or slip through while their attention is elsewhere. But with the syndicate possibly watching, we'll have to be extra cautious. Artemisia handed him a forged ID chip. Arden provided these. We'll pose as mid-level couriers delivering official documents for a Terran bureaucrat. It's mundane enough to avoid red flags, but we'll still get basic clearance to roam certain sectors of the station. Not bad, Damon examined the chip. Name, Carson Doyle. Occupation, diplomatic courier. That's me, I guess. Artemisia smirked faintly. And I'm Malia Shore, your co-courier. No mention of anything, Valoran. If we're lucky, no one will suspect a thing, at least not right away. Damon inserted the forged chip into the nav computer to double-check its digital footprint. Everything seemed in order for a quick electronic inspection, though he knew from experience that Unity Station staff might conduct face-to-face interrogations, especially if triggered by any anomaly. You ready for this? He asked her, adjusting their heading. Because once we dock, the margin for error is razor thin. She met his gaze, silvery eyes reflecting the glimmer of the console lights. I'll do whatever it takes. We can't let my cousin keep orchestrating chaos. He'll tear Valaran's space apart just to set himself up as the new ruler. Something in her voice, the quiet fear beneath the determination, prompted Damon to place a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll stop him." The words came out with more confidence than he expected. If there was one thing Damon Gray had learned from his days in the Terran Defense Forces, it was that unwavering conviction could carry you through the darkest situations. Artemisia gently squeezed his hand, then pulled away to resume her seat. "Thank you, Damon, for risking so much to help me." "You didn't have to." He swallowed, unsure how to respond. Maybe in another life, he would have turned a blind eye to trouble. Yet something about Artemisia, her unwavering resolve, her regal poise, her vulnerability, stirred a spark he thought long snuffed out. Instead of replying, he keyed in the jump coordinates to Unity Station and watched as the stars stretched into bright lines. The Star Chaser vaulted into hyperspace, carrying them toward a confrontation that would decide not just Artemisia's future, but possibly the fate of an entire region of space. Unity Station came into view with a grandeur that belied the tension burning in Damon's gut. An enormous ring-shaped structure encircled a central hub, connected by multiple spokes dotted with docking bays, administrative centers, and habitats for its vast population. Twinkling lights and the glow of countless windows gave it the appearance of a city adrift in the cosmos. Vessels of all shapes and sizes glided around the ring in a well-orchestrated dance, guided by the station's formidable traffic control system. "Approaching Unity Station," came a crisp voice over the comm. "State your identification, purpose, and cargo." Damon slid a glance at Artemisia, who nodded and tapped the console to transmit their forged credentials. "This is Diplomatic Courier Carson Doyle and Co-Courier Malia Shore," he said, adopting a practiced neutrality in his tone. "We're delivering sealed documents from the Terran Consulate on Jellin 3. "Stand by." The comm line crackled with a moment of silence. Damon's grip on the throttle tightened. If the station system flagged the ID as phony, they'd have to fight their way out in seconds. Eventually, the voice returned. "Credentials verified. Proceed to Docking Bay 28A. Maintain designated approach vector, and do not deviate." "Understood," Damon said, releasing a subtle breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He guided the Star Chaser into the assigned corridor, weaving past sleek diplomatic shuttles and bulky cargo freighters. Every so often, they passed station security patrols, small but well-armed vessels that scanned the incoming traffic. As they neared the docking bay, Artemisia double-checked the data storage unit hidden beneath her jacket. "Once we're aboard, we make our way to the administration wing. There should be a secure data terminal for official government transmissions. It's exactly what we need." Damon eased the ship to land on the circular deck, the automated system clamping onto the undercarriage. When the hatch hissed open, they were greeted by a sterile environment of gleaming floors and uniformed station attendants. The difference between this polished setting and Baron's Rest was night and day. Here, everything ran like clockwork, with vigilance evident in every official's stance. They stepped onto the platform, forging pleasant smiles for the attendant who asked for a quick scan of their ID chips. The moment felt agonizingly long, but the scan cleared. "Welcome to Unity Station," the attendant said. "Your assigned corridor is to the left. Enjoy your stay." Moving with casual determination, Damon and Artemisia headed down a hall lined with plush waiting benches and potted synthetic plants. Large display panels announced various diplomatic meetings and trade council sessions. Security cameras blinked overhead, tracking every passerby. They were inside but hardly free. Their paths soon led them to a checkpoint supervised by station security in crisp uniforms. Through the narrow gap between an officer's shoulder and a scanning console, Damon glimpsed the corridor beyond, which led toward the administration wing. He knew that if they could just pass this security check, they'd be one step closer to broadcasting the damning data. Suddenly, an alarm blared from a side passage. Shouts echoed, and several security guards sprinted away from their post. Damon's pulse kicked up. The cause of that ruckus was unknown, but it might be the diversion they needed, unless it was also a sign that the Black Sun Syndicate was already onto them. Artemisia placed a hand on his arm, her gaze sharp. "We slipped through, now, before the rest of them locked down the area." "Let's make it fast," Damon murmured. With a subtle nod, they advanced, mindful that at any second, someone might raise the alarm that a wanted princess and a rogue ex-soldier had entered Unity Station. Alarms blared in the distance, echoing through the gleaming corridors of Unity Station. Damon Gray and Princess Artemisia used the commotion as a cover, skirting the main checkpoint, while several uniformed security personnel rushed away to investigate whatever crisis had erupted nearby. They slipped through a side alcove, emerging in a corridor lined with hollow posters advertising everything from interstellar cruises to diplomatic summits. Dome-shaped surveillance cameras studded the ceiling at regular intervals, and each one made Damon's stomach tighten. The forged identification chips might fool the station's automated scans, but a vigilant officer scrutinizing their faces would spell disaster. Glancing around for watchers, Damon led Artemisia past a sealed hatch labeled Employees Only, the sign flickering in the station's sterile lighting. According to the station schematics they'd acquired from Arden, just beyond that hatch lay a maintenance route that bypassed standard security channels and led closer to the administration wing, where they needed to upload the incriminating data. "Over here," Damon whispered, checking the hatch's lock mechanism. It required an authorized code, but thanks to Arden's infiltration software, he had a bypass device. He pressed the device against the keypad, and the lock icon turned from red to green with a soft beep. The hatch slid aside and they stepped into a narrow tunnel of exposed wiring, coolant pipes, and the faint smell of industrial lubricant. Flickering emergency lights revealed metal grates and half-finished repairs. A thrum of distant machinery vibrated through the walls. Artemisia moved with surprising confidence in the cramped space, using a handheld scanner to check for any hidden sensors. Now and then, Damon heard muffled shouts from beyond the bulkheads, presumably security teams responding to the station-wide alert. He wondered if the alarm had anything to do with them, if perhaps the Black Sun Syndicate had deliberately triggered chaos to flush them out, or if it was mere coincidence. Either way, the commotion bought them precious minutes. They crawled through winding passageways until they reached a junction that, if their map was correct, lay directly beneath the administration block. Above them, a sealed ceiling hatch bore a station insignia, a stylized ring with an embedded planet. Damon paused, pressing a palm to the metal, feeling a faint hum of energy from the systems overhead. "According to the schematic," he murmured, "this leads to a sub-office near the main data center. We go up, find a terminal, and upload your cousin's dirty secrets before anyone can stop us." Artemisia nodded resolutely. "We have to do it quickly. If the syndicate is here or if station security has been tipped off, they'll move fast once they realize who I am." She touched the hidden storage unit beneath her jacket, where the incriminating evidence awaited. Her eyes flashed with determination and a hint of apprehension. "We can't leave Valarin in his hands." Damon understood. He positioned himself under the hatch, tension coiling through his muscles like a spring. "On three," he said quietly. "1, 2, 3. He shoved upward, and the hatch popped open, revealing a well-lit corridor and the faint hum of computers. Climbing through, Damon offered Artemisia a hand, pulling her up beside him. They found themselves in a wide hallway with a polished floor that reflected the overhead glow. Offices branched off on either side, some with transparent doors showing glimpses of administrative workers hunched over data consoles. The outer ring of the station might have been more relaxed, but here, uniformed staff walked with brisk efficiency, carrying tablets or speaking in low voices into their headsets. A few paused to give curious looks at Damon and Artemisia, who were clearly out of place, but no immediate challenge came. Their forged ID chips might still be holding up, or perhaps no one suspected that a Valarin princess walked among them. Keeping their heads down, they took a turn that led to a large sign, "Authorized Personnel, Data Center Access Only." Damon mentally compared it to Arden's notes and confirmed this was their target. Beyond those doors lay the secure data nodes for official broadcasts, exactly where they needed to insert the princess's data trove. Artemisia took a steadying breath. "Let's hope your infiltration protocols actually work. Once I initiate the broadcast, every channel on the station will get a copy. It'll also beam it out to every major interstellar data relay. Then your cousin's coup attempt becomes public knowledge," Damon said. "He won't be able to hide behind excuses or bribes. Even the syndicate can't spin that many facts at once." He placed his hand on the door's access panel. A ring of light scanned his palm, then turned green. The door hissed open, revealing an antechamber filled with humming servers. Rows of blinking consoles stretched along the walls, each labeled with a category: trade logs, diplomatic archives, galactic council directives, and more. Before they could step forward, an imposing figure emerged from behind one of the server banks, flanked by two gun-wielding thugs in black tactical gear. The man wore an elaborately tailored uniform with the embroidered crest of House Lasari. Damon recognized him from the images in Arden's files. Leston, the very cousin who had orchestrated Artemisia's capture. He had a predatory smile on his face, cold eyes scanning them both. "My dear cousin," he purred, focusing on Artemisia. "How wonderful of you to come straight into my trap." Two more guards appeared, forming a semicircle around them. Damon's grip twitched near his concealed blaster. He silently cursed himself. They had been so busy avoiding station security that they hadn't considered Leston might have infiltration channels of his own. He must have used syndicate muscle or bribed officials to get here first, suspecting their plan. "Leston," Artemisia said, lifting her chin. There was a controlled anger in her voice. "Still skulking around, I see. You've grown bold if you're willing to pull a stunt like this in Unity Station." He gave a dismissive gesture. "Boldness is necessary when dealing with stubborn obstacles. You should have stayed missing. Now I'll have to ensure you vanish permanently." He turned to Damon. "And you, some mercenary or ex-soldier? Doesn't matter. Once my men are done with you, no one will ever know how close you came to spoiling my plans." A million scenarios flashed through Damon's mind. Even if he tried to draw his weapon, Leston's guards would riddle him with plasma bolts. Artemisia, though determined, was similarly pinned. Yet he noticed her subtle shift. She was edging toward the nearest console, hand drifting under her jacket as if searching for the data device. "This ends now," Leston said, leveling a sleek energy pistol at his cousin. "Say goodbye to your claim on Valeran." Damon reacted on instinct. He faked a lunge to the side, drawing the guard's attention away from Artemisia. In the blink of an eye, Leston's men trained their weapons on him, forcing him to dive behind a tall server rack. Laser pulses sizzled through the air, narrowly missing his shoulder. They bored smoking holes into the console behind him, sending sparks and shards of metal flying. Over the chaos, he heard Artemisia move. A muffled clack of keys, a faint beep. She was accessing the broadcast interface. Even amidst flying debris, Damon felt a surge of hope. If she could just get that data uploaded, all might not be lost. "Stop her!" Leston roared, realizing too late what Artemisia was doing. Two of his guards spun around, firing toward her location. She ducked behind the data center's main control panel, peeking out only long enough to continue tapping at the console. Damon, still huddled behind the server rack, managed to get a clear line of sight on one of the guards. He aimed his own blaster, an old but reliable Terran sidearm, and fired. The shot crackled against the guard's torso plating, sending him sprawling. The other guard shouted, returning fire. Damon threw himself flat. Energy bolts smacked the panels overhead, and an alarm klaxon began wailing. No doubt alerted to unauthorized weapons discharge. The station's security forces would arrive soon, complicating matters for all involved. If Leston wanted to minimize witnesses, he'd have to act fast. That might be a small advantage, Damon realized. Desperate men often made mistakes. Crouching low, Damon craned his neck to check on Artemisia. She was still alive, pressed up against the console side, her face taut with concentration. He could see her lips moving, perhaps whispering the final lines of the encryption code she had to enter. Leston, meanwhile, barked orders to his remaining guards, pointing furiously at her. "Shoot to kill," he snarled, eyes wild. "I can't risk that data going out." Laser pulses streaked across the room. At least one scorched Artemisia's shoulder, ripping a cry of pain from her. Damon felt a flash of rage. He rolled out from behind the server rack, firing repeatedly. The hail of shots forced Leston's men to duck. He managed to wound one guard, the sizzling bolt striking an unprotected leg. The man collapsed, groaning as electricity arced around the wound. During the confusion, Artemisia rose, pressing the final command on the console. A high-pitched tone signaled the broadcast sequence had begun. Triumph flashed in her eyes. "It's done," she cried, voice echoing in the smoky chamber. "All your treachery is about to be exposed to the entire station and beyond." Leston's outraged scream shattered the moment of victory. In a single fluid motion, he leveled his weapon at Artemisia's heart and fired. She had no chance to dodge. Damon acted without thinking, He hurled himself between the shot and its target. A searing bolt of energy slammed into his chest. The world exploded into white-hot agony as he collapsed, consciousness fading to the sound of Artemisia screaming his name. When Damon came to, everything was blurred by a piercing light and the muted beeping of medical monitors. The ache in his chest felt like a supernova, each breath a struggle. A faint antiseptic smell stung his nostrils. Disoriented, he tried to push himself upright, only to find that his limbs were slow to respond. A gentle hand pressed against his shoulder, easing him back. "Don't strain yourself," said a familiar voice. Artemisia's face hovered into his field of vision, looking exhausted but relieved. Her violet skin seemed even paler than usual, and a bandage covered her wounded shoulder. "You're in Unity Station's infirmary. They've stabilized you, but you took a direct plasma hit." Damon tried to speak, but the dryness in his throat turned his first words into a raspy croak. Swallowing, he managed to whisper, Did you make it? The data?" A small, triumphant smile lifted Artemisia's lips. "Yes, the data was broadcast station-wide. The entire Valaran network now knows what Leston did. It's over. He's been arrested, along with his mercenaries. The station's security forces arrived right after you were shot. They detained everyone, found the evidence, and took my statement." She ran a trembling hand over his hair, relief etched into every line of her face. I thought I'd lost you for a moment." Some part of Damon wanted to reassure her with a cocky grin, but pain and lingering sedation dampened his usual swagger. "I'm too stubborn to die," he managed, coughing. "Where is he now, Leston?" Her expression hardened, locked in a detention cell, awaiting transfer back to Valaran space. The Galactic Council is furious that he dared to orchestrate violence on Unity Station, so his political clout means little now. He faces multiple charges, including conspiracy to commit kidnapping, attempted murder, and sabotage of official station operations. Despite the pain, Damon felt a surge of relief. He let his eyes close for a moment, picturing the swirling chaos of that data center. "I couldn't let him kill you," he said softly. "I just moved." Artemisia bowed her head over his hand, which was wrapped in medical sensors. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved me. I owe you everything." Footsteps approached, and a station medic with bright teal hair and a crisp uniform stepped forward. He needs rest, Your Highness," the medic said kindly. "We've done what we can, but his body needs time to fully heal. High-intensity plasma burns can't be rushed, even with advanced treatments." "Your Highness." Damon's mind felt numb, but the reminder that Artemisia was a true princess gave him a faint sense of amazement. "So it's confirmed," he murmured, forcing a small smile. "They all know who you are now." A flicker of wry humor passed over Artemisia's face. "There's no hiding it anymore. Word spread the moment the transmissions went out. My cousin's coup is thwarted, and I've been recognized as the rightful heir to House Lisari. Officials from Valoran are en route to formalize the charges and see to my safe return." She squeezed his hand gently. "But I'm not leaving your side until you're well enough to walk." The next few days passed in a haze of medical treatments, station briefings, and endless streams of visitors. Artemisia was frequently called away to answer questions from diplomatic envoys and the station's administrative staff, who all wanted to confirm the unraveling scandal in Valaran space. Damon watched her handle these sessions from his infirmary bed, often glimpsing her through the glass partition. She bore herself with the regal calm he had come to expect, but whenever she returned to his bedside, the moment her gaze rested on him, her composure softened into something tender and unguarded. By the time Damon was able to stand without doubling over in pain, the station's daily bulletins were praising Princess Artemisia's courage in exposing the coup and lauding the unidentified heroic partner who had taken a blast to shield her. Truth be told, Damon was content to remain unnamed for as long as possible. Publicity was never his aim, and his own history with the Terran Defense Forces made him wary of stepping into the spotlight. But the attention was inevitable. Word spread among the quarters that the princess herself was tending to a wounded champion, and rumors began to swirl like cosmic dust motes. On the fifth day, a representative from Valaran space arrived, a dignified older woman in ornate robes who introduced herself as High Counselor Janiri. She escorted Artemisia through the official acknowledgement process, confirming her rightful claim to the throne in light of Leston's failed coup. Damon, leaning against the doorway in a station-issued medical tunic, observed the ceremony from a respectful distance. Janeri concluded by placing a signet ring in Artemisia's hands, symbolizing her formal authority. The princess bowed her head, solemn but composed. Shortly thereafter, Janeri approached Damon with a polite smile. "Captain Gray, I presume, on behalf of House Lissari and Volaran as a whole, we extend our gratitude." Her carefully measured words carried the weight of many traditions. "Should you desire it, the royal treasury is prepared to reward you. Volaran owes you a debt." Damon shifted, unused to such formality being directed at him. I, I just did what needed to be done," he said, glancing at Artemisia, who met his gaze with a gentle smile. Janeri nodded. "Nonetheless, your actions change the course of our future. Please consider staying under our hospitality once the princess returns home. There will be celebrations, and your presence would honor us." He looked to Artemisia, uncertain. Though his chest still ached, he couldn't deny the warmth spreading through him at the prospect of remaining by her side. Over the past days, they had fought, bled, and laughed together. Something unspoken had formed between them, an undeniable bond forged in crisis and nurtured in quiet conversations by the infirmary bed. "I'm not sure I'd fit in at a royal palace," he said wryly, "but maybe I can try." He shot Artemisia a hopeful look, silently asking if she truly wanted him in that world. Her answer came as a barely contained grin. She took his hand, and her silver eyes sparkled with gratitude and something deeper, something that tugged at his heart with surprising force. 6 months later, Damon Gray stood on a polished marble balcony overlooking the capital city of Volaran Prime. It was a breathtaking vista. Spires of crystalline architecture rose against a pastel sky, and swooping bridges arced between elevated walkways, where citizens in vibrant attire moved about. Down below, a wide boulevard led toward a massive palace gate, flanked by towering sculptures of Volaran monarchs past. The city, once overshadowed by rumors of civil conflict, now thrived with renewed energy. Banners bearing the sigil of House Lissari fluttered in the breeze, celebrating the coronation of Artemisia as the new sovereign. To Damon, who was more accustomed to cramped starship cockpits and dingy outposts, the grandeur felt almost unreal. Yet he found a curious sense of comfort here, an acceptance that, against all odds, he belonged. Leaning against the balcony rail, he listened to the gentle hum of anti-grav transports passing overhead. His chest, once seared by Leston's plasma bolt, had healed considerably, thanks to Volaran medical technology. A faint scar, crossing just beneath his collarbone, served as a constant reminder of the day he chose to protect Artemisia at any cost. "She's been asking for you," came a voice from behind. Turning, Damon saw High Counselor Janeri wearing ceremonial robes, the ornate Volaran crest woven into the fabric. She gestured toward the grand hall at the far end of the palace complex. "The official ceremony is done. Now it's time for the private celebration. Her Majesty would like you at her side." Damon ran a hand through his hair and nodded. "Right, let's not keep her waiting." Crossing the sparkling corridors of the palace, he marveled at how quickly everything had changed since that fateful job run to Crescent 9. He recalled stepping into a shabby outpost with a belly full of frustration at a dishonest trader, and now he was stepping into the domain of a queen. It felt as though entire lifetimes had passed in that span. The private reception hall was smaller than the great throne room, but still exuded opulence. Tall, stained glass windows depicted scenes from Volaran's storied history, while carved columns lined the walls. At the room's center, perched on a high-back seat that was neither gaudy nor plain, sat Artemisia. She wore a flowing gown in the same deep amethyst hue as her skin, accented with silver filigree that matched the glimmer in her eyes. When she saw Damon approach, a radiant smile illuminated her face, more genuine than any regal mask she might don for the courtiers. She dismissed the attendants with a gentle wave, and soon it was just the two of them in the softly lit chamber. Damon offered a half bow, more playful than formal. "Your Majesty," he teased, though there was awe in his voice. Artemisia rose, stepping down to stand before him. "Spare me the ceremony, Damon. We've shed too much blood together for that." She reached for his hand, fingers entwining with his. Besides, you know I hate it when you're anything less than yourself. A rush of warmth spread through him at her touch. Old habits die hard, he admitted, though I am getting better at palace life. I haven't accidentally insulted any dignitaries in at least 2 weeks. She laughed, a musical sound that seemed to soften the grandeur around them. You're doing well, especially considering you used to bribe docking clerks to overlook your weapon caches. Her expression turned earnest. I've had many suitors over the years, but no one has ever shielded me from laser fire or risked their life to expose a traitor. The palace feels more real with you here. Damon took a small step closer. I still feel like an interloper in a fancy uniform. But if you truly want me by your side, I'm here, for as long as you'll have me. In response, Artemisia leaned in and pressed her forehead to his, a Valaran gesture signifying trust and intimacy. I want nothing less, she whispered, her breath warm against his lips. You saved my throne. More importantly, you saved me. Stay, Damon. Be part of this kingdom we're rebuilding. He wrapped his arms around her, inhaling the subtle floral scent that clung to her skin. Then you can count on me, he said softly. Always. Dear creators, Banahadriators, thank you for following the remarkable journeys of Captain Damon Gray and Princess Artemisia of House Lysari. From the grimy halls of Crescent 9 to the resplendent throne rooms of Valaran Prime, their story proves that sometimes the most unexpected partnerships can reshape destinies. In an unlikely twist of fate, a jaded soldier-turned-mercenary took on a job that led him straight into the path of a captive princess. Instead of turning away, he championed her cause, a cause that turned out to be far more than a simple rescue. Together they braved mercenaries, cosmic hazards, and political betrayals, all to unveil a treacherous plot aimed at overthrowing a royal lineage. Their bond, forged by shared danger, survived even the plasma bolt that nearly claimed Damon's life. In these events, we find echoes of some timeless truths. Honor can appear in the most unexpected hearts, loyalty can conquer fear, and sometimes love begins with the smallest choices, like deciding not to walk away from someone in need. The galaxy they inhabit is vast, dotted with stations that operate in moral twilight and nebulae that swallow starships whole. Yet Damon and Artemisia discovered that no darkness can fully eclipse hope when two people stand together. They have now embarked on the challenge of uniting a kingdom strained by betrayal, rebuilding trust in the aftermath of Leston's failed coup. Artemisia's coronation signals not only her ascent, but the restoration of stability to her domain. Damon, once an outsider with his own baggage, steps into a role that will test him in entirely new ways, no longer merely a pilot or bodyguard, but a partner to a queen whose people look to her for guidance and security. Their shared experiences, from the dogfights amid the Celestine Shroud to the frantic firefight in Unity Station's data center, have woven an unbreakable thread of connection between them. What becomes of the Star Chaser, Damon's trusty ship now that he has found a place at the princess's side? Will he continue flying missions throughout the galaxy in her service, forging alliances and ensuring the safety of Valaran's trade routes? Or will he take on a more formal role, a consort or royal protector in official capacity? The story of Damon Gray and Princess Artemisia offers many such questions, and perhaps future tales will delve into the complexities that lie ahead, meeting each other's families, blending Terran and Valaran cultures, warding off old enemies who might still seek to exploit the upheaval. For now, let us leave them in a moment of contentment, standing close on a marble balcony overlooking the capital, hands linked, hearts steady, two souls who found each other in a galaxy rife with danger, discovering that courage, love, and a stubborn refusal to abandon what truly matters can overcome any trial. Thank you, dear readers, for joining me on this interstellar adventure. If you enjoyed it, feel free to share your favorite moments. Maybe it was Damon's reluctant acceptance of Artemisia as payment, or perhaps their banter in the cockpit while dodging laser fire. And who knows, if we listen closely, we might soon hear the Star Chaser's engines roaring to life for another grand escapade among the stars. Until then, may your travels be safe, your allies be true, and your hearts find the courage to embrace the unexpected. Looking back on Damon and Artemisia's story, It's easy to see how resilience, honor, and devotion can triumph over the most daunting odds. They began as reluctant allies, a battle-hardened soldier and a noble heir, yet their shared trials transformed them into steadfast partners. From defending isolated outposts to confronting political treachery head-on, they forged a bond that carried both a kingdom and themselves into a brighter era. In a galaxy filled with mercenaries, cosmic storms, and hidden dangers, Damon and Artemisia proved that unity and compassion can rise above corruption. Their adventure continues in spirit, reminding us all that love and courage can make even the darkest corners of the universe shine. What did you think of their epic journey? Comment below with your thoughts, theories, and favorite moments. Let's keep the conversation going.